So the situation that the Gospels are the record of the apostles' teaching is a great way to understand the differences and the similarities of the Gospels. Start with the similarities. When Paul wrote to the church in Corinth, and when he praised them for maintaining the traditions as he had delivered them to the church, he goes on to cite in that same chapter, 1 Corinthians 11, one of those traditions that he had received and delivered to the church in Corinth. He cites then, and he calls it a tradition, the words of the institution of the Lord's Supper. Now we know fairly well that Paul must have written the 1 Corinthians around the year 54-55. That was about a couple of decades before Luke wrote his Gospel. But when Luke wrote down the Gospel, just as the eyewitnesses had been teaching the whole thing, he does so in exactly the same words as Paul had used in 1 Corinthians 11 to give the words of the institution of the Lord's Supper. So this helps us to understand that the Gospels, when they were written down, would not contain anything new for the people who are listening. No, they were actually seeing now on paper things they had been teaching for quite a while. And that, of course, meant that the evangelists could not change that much in the teaching they were written down, because there was a whole community around them who actually knew the words already. And at that point, they were written down. You get that sort of control mechanism. At the same time, the apostles had been with Jesus for quite some time. And without doubt, we only have a fraction of what Jesus taught. I mean, John says at the end of his Gospel, now, if everything would have been written down that Jesus taught and did, the world could not contain all the books. So we have a summary. The longest speech we have is from Jesus is the Sermon on the Mount, 3 chapters long. If you read it sort of slowly, it is about 20 minutes. And I find it hard to believe that all those thousands of people would go up the mountain, listen to a relatively short sermon of only 20 minutes and go down again. Now what we have is a summary, a condensation of the teaching of Jesus. And it is not strange that different eyewitnesses will give different summaries of what Jesus had done. Yes, there was an agreed wording that formed the core of the apostolic teaching, but at the same time, to place individual emphasis in how you tell the story is a sign of a good teacher. And that's exactly what we find in the New Testament.